Hi, this is Mrs. Moore, and we're going to talk about character perspectives and motives. You can use guided notes to take notes, or you can use any note taking approach that you prefer. So, analyzing character means asking, what do these people want? What is it that they desire? We've talked about the descriptions and things that can help us define them, but we want to know what it is that drives them. And characters are a lot like people in this way. They have likes, they have dislikes, they have things that make them get angry and things that make them happy. Um, they have perspectives, outlooks, or attitudes about the world, the people, and the world, the things that they see. And they have biases, which are a perspective that's sort of ingrained and sometimes unconscious. This idea that they're in favor of or against a particular thing, a person, a group, that sort of thing. So together, perspectives and biases tell us how it is that a character kind of perceives the world around them. And we have talked about perspective before, so this shouldn't seem new. You know that we get clues to who a character is through description, dialogue, and behavior, and we get clues about their perspective that way too. But we also have to consider things like word choice. What sort of choice words does the character use to describe something, or does the narrator use for that character? Syntax. How does the character speak? What level of complexity do they use in their sentence structure, and why? And imagery used by or about the character. How do they use imagery about other people, which kind of can convey something of their perspective, imagery that they maybe use about themselves, or imagery that's used in the text to describe them. So we're going to look at an example. This is Victor's perspective of Elizabeth Lavenza. She is well, in 1818, she's his cousin. In 1831, she's his adopted sister. The saintly soul of Elizabeth shone like a shrine dedicated lamp in our peaceful home. Her sympathy was ours. Her smile, her soft voice, the sweet glance of her celestial eyes were ever there to bless and animate us. She was the living spirit of love to soften and attract. I might have become sullen in my study, rough through the ardor of my nature, but that she was there to subdue me to a semblance of her own gentleness. Sorry about that. So I've sort of underlined as I've gone the things that stood out to me as I read this passage, which is Victor directly describing Elizabeth. But the choice of words and imagery that he uses reveals a lot. And we're going to look at that more closely. So, how Victor sees Elizabeth, he uses words like saintly, shrine dedicated. And that means shrine dedicated means someone who's dedicated to maintaining a shrine, a religious shrine. Sweet and soft. She blessed and animated us. And animate in this terminology can be made us lively, but it also can mean brings us to life. Celestial, meaning heavenly. She's a living spirit of love. She softens and attracts. She's gentle. All of these things describe Elizabeth, and you're probably picking up on some of the same things I am, which is this angelic imagery, right? Saintly, shrine dedicated, blessed, celestial. Victor sees her as so good and so special. His imagery conveys that he sees her as something better than and higher than a human person, right? He's like set her up on this giant pedestal. Um, and more to the point, he says that, her role is to bless and animate us. She's a living spirit of love to soften and attract. He sees her as there as part of their house to keep their house on this kind of more heavenly, more good path. But the thing about this passage is it also reveals what Victor's perspective is on himself, right? He describes himself as sullen and rough, or says he would be if it wasn't for Elizabeth. And he says he has to be subdued. Not that he's convinced or that he had, no, he's subdued into a semblance of gentleness by Elizabeth. And semblance there is an interesting word because it doesn't say that he becomes gentle. It says that he becomes something that looks or seems gentle. So his perspective of himself definitely is that he is not someone who is as heavenly, as perfect as he is. He is someone who is sullen and rough and has to be made to appear gentle. He can't really truly be gentle himself. So it's interesting how the choice of his words helps us see that. So for perspective and motive, if perspective is how characters see the world and other people in it, motive is what they want to do in with or to it. So for example, Victor sees Elizabeth as this extremely perfect and beautiful creature in a way, this kind of angel in their house. And his motive is typically seems to be to protect her, or to depend on her. Like his motive is that he needs her in some way. Motive drives characters' actions, and it also drives characters into conflict, because what you want, sorry, there was something moving behind me. What you want and what you need are sometimes in conflict with those around you, as you can see through this one. So that motive can be internal or external. So character motivations are of several kinds. The typical ones, we start with needs. These are the things that we have to have in order to live. It starts with your physiological basic needs. I need to eat, sleep, breathe, have something on, shelter, and works its way up to esteem and self-actualization. And Maslow's theory, if you haven't had AP Psych yet, is that you cannot strive, you won't have these needs, or you won't be able to work on these needs until these lower red, orange, yellow needs are met. So you will be working towards, if these are the needs that you have, they're going to be primary, that's all you're going to be able to focus on as a motive until you get those and feel solid in those, and then you can work to the higher levels. Wants are something slightly different. Those are things that we desire, and they may be material, but they may not be. Wealth, and that kind of thing. I want the latest smartphone. I want a new car. Those things are things that we want that are material, but there are also things we want that aren't material. Fame, a good reputation, getting into the right college. Those kinds of things are things that we desire, but they're not necessarily required for us to live. So when motives clash, that creates conflict. If I want to get into this specific program and you want to get into this specific program and there's only one position, we suddenly have a conflict, right? But sometimes this can be an internal, that's an external. For some of us, we can also have an internal conflict. For example, Victor wants to be worthy of Elizabeth in some way. He sees himself as not worthy of her. That is an internal conflict. So sometimes characters state motive directly, and sometimes they're more indirect, and we have to figure out motive from text clues. This excerpt from chapter 2, I'm going to let you pause and read it. Okay, you're back. This is a description of what happens after they see a lightning strike and an oak tree outside their house. The visiting person tells them all about electricity and galvanism, which Victor finds new and astonishing. He's never heard of this because he's been spending all of his time studying Agrippa and Paracelsus, which are alchemists. So he says, it seemed to me as if nothing would or ever could be known. All that had so long engaged my attention suddenly grew despicable. So he's directly saying he walked away from alchemy and from natural philosophy as a whole for a little while, because it seemed, and he says, because it seemed that if nothing could or would be known, and everything that had engaged him became despicable, and he at once gave up his former applications, set down all of these, his studies of science and natural history. And so his motive here is interesting because this is kind of a peek into the mind of Victor. Victor's not always very direct about, he's very direct about some things, but not all things. And in this case, he's kind of telling us that what was important to him about this science was that he wanted to know everything. And when he discovers that you might not be able to know everything, then his motive for science suddenly dissipates. Like, well, if I'm not going to know it all, then I can't keep going. And he gives all of it up for about 5 minutes. Don't worry. This is chapter 2. And in chapter 3, he'll be back. But he set down natural history and all its progeny as a deformed and abortive creation, which is a very interesting kind of description considering what he's going to be getting up to soon. I'm not sure why it's doing this. There we go. I don't know. Something there. All right. Something about my animation went off. All right. So why motive is important. As we mentioned, motives drive characters into conflict, and conflict is the engine of Western plot. But motives are also clues to character, what someone wants, what they need. Those kinds of things can be in conflict with each other, and it shows us how people deal with their motives, kind of shows us who they are, as we've just seen with Victor. He sees lightning hit the tree and decides he's going to have nothing more to do with alchemy because he'll never be able to learn it all and be the know-it-all that he wants to be, until he figures out that maybe there's a way. So what do characters want, and why does that matter? What characters want drives them. How they see the world is driven by that. And also the actions that they take are driven by that as well. So that is why character motive and character perspective matter, because they contribute to character complexity.